I was 18 years old when I first told my mum about my gambling addiction. I lost about 40 grand, and then I've lost a further 80,000 or so over the years. I've been rock bottom this year. I consider just sort of exiting stage left.
How do you feel seeing yourself like that?
I'm really glad that that version of me doesn't exist, or at least doesn't exist at this point in my life. At 16, I won 64 grand from a 50p bet. It's kind of hard to describe exactly how you feel. You generally do just feel top of the world. I did know it was life-changing at the time to win that amount of money. I just didn't realise what part of my life would be changing. That was basically my gateway into gambling. The closer I got towards being 18, the more I deluded myself that I was actually good at it. Like, let me in, like get me going again. Let me use this money. I want to make more and more and more. And then that didn't happen. I lost about 40 grand, and then I've lost a further 80,000 or so over 11 years of addiction. The biggest thing in my life at the moment is just trying to stay clean. Hello.
When was the last time you placed a bet?
The last bet I placed was 3 days ago. My last bet was in the middle of January of this year.
What is your job?
Currently, I'm seeking employment at the moment after being let go from a marketing job. I work as a digital comms officer for a gambling harms charity.
How much is in your bank account?
My bank's 0 pennies in there. I've got a few £1,000s left in my bank at the moment, with some of it going to a lifetime ISA.
What does addiction mean to you?
Addiction is like a massive grasp on you. It won't let you go. You will exhaust every other option, bar none, to keep going with it. It'll just it'll keep you down. It'll keep you down. But whilst you're in the moment, and whilst you are properly involved in whatever addiction you've got, so for me, gambling, for as long as I'm doing it, I would be deluded into thinking it's actually making me feel really good. It's really hard to think of like addiction as something you should actually try and leave behind and move on and do other things. And it's easier said than done, and it's been a journey, and that might have been in part why I did a little relapse. Like, what do I do after addiction? Who am I as like a person? However toxic it is for me, it is or was part of my life. My addiction has cost me, obviously financially, but the biggest thing for me is my time. You know, you can look forward, I can look forward, but there's still 10 years of life that was scarred and tainted by gambling.
Would you describe yourself as addicted to gambling?
I would use both terms of problem gambler or gambling addict. I would describe myself as addicted to gambling because I know the moment I turn on that tap, I'm back in the world, and very aggressively.
And what's the most extreme length you've gone to fuel your addiction?
The most extreme thing with this gambling addiction is what I've done is with the payday loans. In 2023, taking out 6 loans within 7 days. When I've gone back to them and said, would you ever write this off with my mental state? They've always turned back to me and said, well, in your declaration, you've said that you've indicated you won't be using this for gambling. You can have counselling, I could have all the bank blocks in the world, but if I ultimately never wanted to stop or don't want to stop, that all is futile.
What's rock bottom look like?
I've been rock bottom this year. I'd reached sort of a crisis point of becoming so tired of the monotonous recovery, relapse process that I considered just sort of exiting stage left, just calling it quits, because it becomes so tiresome to just get clean, be happy about it, and then fall back into the trap of the bad habit. So I'd reached a crisis point where I was in my car and thought, do I really want to go through with that recovery phase anymore? It became much more daunting compared to the first time of trying to get clean, where it felt like, yeah, I really want to get clean. Like, I really want to fight this. It's like I lost a bit of, spirit and fight within me. It's strange. I mean, even just like looking at me like physically, I think like I look ill, and I think for the longest time I just considered that I could hide how I looked physically, like when I was ill from gambling. And the fact that it comes out quite transparent in this film is like kind of a little bit mind-blowing.
What was going on in your life when we filmed the last interview?
There'd been a lot of like internal turmoil, like the 4 months basically in the lead up to that interview, where life just wasn't where I wanted it to be, and partly where I didn't really want to be around anymore. I felt kind of completely lost, didn't really have a purpose or a drive. I'm really glad that I've left that phase of my life, of that version of me behind.
How's your relationship with your parents?
They don't understand gambling addiction, and they never will to the extent that someone with a lived-in experience will, but still recognising it as an illness as it should be. So like, they've been there to support me, just to get me through the days. They just wanted to make me better. My biggest support, like, is still my parents. They're just so emotionally strong for me. They're there for me again and again and again, and it's like just unrelenting in the nicest way possible.
I saw that your nan died in September. What impact do you think that's had on your recovery?
Once my nan had passed away, a few days after, I started to really like reflect on the choices I'd made whilst I was going through that 4-month spell at the start of last year of gambling. I wasn't seeing anyone, and that included my nan. I could have visited at any time, and yeah, I chose to gamble, and yeah, it was really hard to let go of that guilt of like, I missed out on all the opportunity, and no matter how clean I stay now, I'll never get to do that with her. And that was like, ultimately I kind of came round to this point of view of like, she would just want me to be myself again, to be whole. And like, that's the biggest kind of gift or I guess, tribute that I can give her now, really. That's what I can do.
How are you mentally right now?
It did get better when I was clean prior to this for a few months. It did start to subside, and I had some days of content. But recently I relapsed, and it's affected me again quite badly on both like the anxiety, depression, struggling with the sleep, having a lot of shame and feeling quite sick, you know, especially when I'm alone with my thoughts. Yeah, it's... Honestly, I do feel night and day from that, from a mental clarity kind of point of view. It's so much quieter up there, and that can have its pros and cons. You know, you can sometimes feel quite empty without it because it's all you've known. And at that time, it was still really part of my life. And now it's just that settling where it's just steady. And I'm almost waiting for a spike. And that was, again, the hardest thing for me to accept, that life should just be like that.
What was the last thing you bought?
It's actually really tough because, like, as an addict, I just don't buy things. Like, my value of things is even when I've had money and been clean from it, the idea of going into like H&M or something and getting a 30 quid nice top would be like a big decision for me. But a £300 bet is like, yeah, you can do that. That's an easy thing to think about. Like, why even doubt yourself? Like, just go in, all in. Yeah, it's crazy to think like the relationship with money has kind of changed for me. That has been the trickiest thing since being clean. It's just like rewarding myself. You know, I've able to recently like go on holiday. I felt very at ease for a first time in a long time. Like, that's something that this guy here wouldn't have like dreamt or even possible of like doing, or wouldn't even thought where to start. I always deluded myself that gambling would be the way I'd be able to go and get a house, to be able to go and get a nice car. And yet the way that's only ever been possible in my life has been by not gambling.
What does recovery mean for you?
To find contentment is my key to recovery. Like, I don't expect to be the happiest person on the planet. I don't want to be rich and like a CEO in 3 years. I generally just want to feel content and wake up, not stressing about. I want to have the daily stress. I don't want to have this artificial stress that I've created for myself. I generally just want to feel at peace. Yeah, that's like being a millionaire to me, is having the peace. It honestly feels like you get rich from it. Just being a normal 28-year-old, which just at that juncture, I just wasn't. I just wasn't that person. So the fact that I've been able to sort of get from there to now, that's the biggest part of recovery. I don't think the recovery ever stops, but it definitely feels like I'm whole again. Definitely.